The Lullaby Fairy, written by Maria Hennings Hunt, illustrated by Sarah Leah Wills. Billy couldn't sleep. He always went to bed at 7:30 and he always fell asleep quickly, but not tonight. Tonight his eyes were wide open and he didn't feel sleepy at all. Billy tried lying on his tummy. He didn't fall asleep. He tried lying on his back. He didn't fall asleep. He closed his eyes really tight and counted to the highest number he knew, which wasn't very high, but that was no good either. He was still awake. He closed his eyes even tighter and tried again, but it was no good. He just didn't feel sleepy at all. He opened his eyes again, and then he blinked, and then he rubbed his eyes. Maybe he was already asleep, he thought, because surely he must be dreaming, as there, sitting on the end of his bed, was a tiny fairy. "Hello," said the fairy, smiling at Billy. Billy didn't say anything. He just stared at the fairy. "Why are you staring at me?" asked the fairy. "Haven't you ever seen a fairy before?" Billy stopped staring and shook his head. "No," he said, "I've never seen a fairy before, especially one with rainbow hair. And anyway," he said, "there's no such thing as fairies." "Really?" said the fairy. She flew over towards Billy and landed gently on his pillow. "So you don't want me to help you get to sleep then?" "I don't need any help," said Billy. "I can get to sleep all by myself." "So how come you're still awake then?" asked the fairy. "Are you sure you wouldn't like me to try a few sleepy spells?" "No, thank you," said Billy. "You might turn me into a frog or something by mistake." The fairy laughed. Her wings quivered and little bits of sparkle fell off her wings and landed softly on the bed like snow. "Don't be silly," she said. "I won't turn you into a frog. Frog spells and sleepy spells are quite different." Billy thought for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Make me go to sleep." The fairy told Billy to lie down and close his eyes. She sprinkled a little something on his face. It smelt nice and made him feel a little bit sleepy. But then it began to tickle his nose. Billy felt a sneeze coming on. He wiggled his nose to try and stop it, but it was no good. Achoo! Billy sneezed so hard he blew the fairy right off the bed and onto the floor. "Oh dear," said Billy. "I'm sorry. Are you all right?" The fairy picked herself up off the floor. "That was my last bit of fairy dust. Oh, it's never made anyone sneeze before," she grumbled. "Well, it tickled my nose," said Billy. "Never mind," said the fairy. "Let me try another spell." Billy lay down and closed his eyes again. He heard the fairy saying some funny words that sounded like a spell. When she had finished speaking, he kept his eyes closed and waited for something to happen. Nothing happened, and he still wasn't asleep. Billy opened his eyes and looked around for the fairy. He couldn't see her at all. Where was she? Maybe she had gone. But then he spotted her. She was curled up at the bottom of his bed, and she was fast asleep. Billy leant over and gently poked her with his finger. She opened her eyes wide and sat up. What happened?" she asked Billy. Billy tried not to laugh. "I think you put yourself to sleep instead of me," he giggled. Silly me, said the fairy. She gave a big yawn. Ugh. Never mind, I've one more sleepy spell to try. Oh, you'll be fast asleep in no time, she said. The fairy told Billy to watch carefully. She flew to the end of his bed and began to wave her wand around. Bright colours, sparks suddenly started to come out at the end and whiz around his bedroom. Billy watched them. They were a bit like fireworks. Some of them bounced off the walls, others bounced off his toys, and some of them landed on Billy and then flew off again. They were pretty, but they didn't make him feel very sleepy. Suddenly, a blue spark, a pink one, and a yellow one all bounced off the wardrobe and flew at the fairy. Billy watched as she jumped over the blue one, almost tripped over the pink one, but the yellow one knocked her backwards and she tumbled head over heels onto the floor. She looked so funny that Billy started to laugh. He just couldn't help it. He laughed so hard. By the time all the sparks had disappeared, his tummy ached from laughing so much, and he was more wide awake than ever. That was really funny, he laughed, holding his tummy. It wasn't supposed to be funny, said the fairy, grumbling. It was supposed to make you fall asleep. It didn't work, said Billy. The fairy sighed and sat on Billy's bed. I haven't got any more sleepy spells left, she said. What do we do now then? Asked Billy. I could sing you a lullaby, suggested the fairy. Okay, said Billy, and he lay down on the bed once more and closed his eyes. The fairy started to sing. She had the sweetest voice Billy had ever heard. He didn't understand the words of the lullaby, but the tune made him think of lovely things. It made him think of sunshine and cuddles from his mummy. It made him think of ice cream and popcorn and being at the seaside. But best of all, the song made him feel really sleepy. Before the fairy had finished singing her lullaby, Billy was fast asleep. When Billy woke up in the morning, he remembered having a strange dream about a fairy with rainbow hair who had sung him a lullaby to help him get to sleep. However, he wasn't sure it had been a dream, as there on the bed where the fairy had sat was a little pile of sparks.